Welcome to the Newman Podcast. Here we feature stories and conversations from the staff, lecturers, parishioners, musicians, and friends of Newman University Church and the Notre Dame Newman Center for Faith and Reason in Dublin, Ireland. I'm your host, Katherine Dunn, Director of IT and Communications here at Newman, and today my guest is Emily Hannon, a House of Brigid Fellow who is just finishing up her year serving at Newman University Church. So welcome, Emily.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for coming all the way upstairs to my office to do this interview. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Who is Emily?
Oh gosh. Well, my name's Emily. I'm from North Carolina. I went to Notre Dame for undergrad where I studied history, and after House of Brigid I will be going to Duke Law School, so I'm moving back to North Carolina, which I'm excited about.
Nice.
Yeah.
So did you grow up in North Carolina then?
I moved there when I was 8.
Okay.
And then from there.
Yeah.
So that's where I consider.
You consider home, yeah. And for those of you who don't know, going to Duke Law School is very impressive, so you should be impressed when you hear that. Yeah. So how did you get to, I want to know how you got to Notre Dame, because I think a lot of people, it's such an easy pipeline from Notre Dame to House of Brigid. So how did you come to going to Notre Dame?
Yeah, I'm the oldest in my family. I've got 3 younger brothers, so I was the first to do the college process, anything. I don't quite remember why I decided to apply to Notre Dame, because I don't come from a Notre Dame family at all. I think one of my brothers liked their football team, but that was separate of any of the rest of us. But I didn't know what I wanted from a university, so I applied to objectively too many places, and I'll figure it out when I see where I've gotten in. Which is kind of what I did for law school too, so I guess it works out. And then based on after I'd heard back from places and kind of knew what the landscape was, I went to admitted students weekends at a few different schools. And I just found the kind of community-oriented culture at Notre Dame very unique, and it reminded me of what I liked most about my high school, so I felt very drawn there, and that's why.
Cool. Yeah. So what were the kind of things you were involved in at Notre Dame?
I had a few different jobs. So I worked in the Arts and Letters Dean's office all 4 years. I worked at a coffee shop 2 years, and did a few different internships and research positions. The biggest thing I did for fun was a Shakespeare company. So it was called the Not So Real Shakespeare Company, kind of a spoof on the famous company. And I did that either acting or producing the entire time.
What was the highlight of that experience then, the Shakespeare stuff?
Ooh. Oh gosh, I think that my favorite show that I did was Measure for Measure, which I did the spring of my junior year. And I liked that one because it was, I acted in one show my senior year, but that was the last show that I was really heavily invested and involved in. And it kind of felt like the culmination of a lot of hard work, which was fun. And it was also cool to read a play and understand a play that I would never have read otherwise.
Yeah, that's really true. Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
Were you involved in any music stuff at Notre Dame? Were you in choir? I can't remember.
I was in my dorm's choir.
Okay.
But I was not the most committed member, but I dabbled.
Self-aware.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's so much music stuff in University Church here. So, okay, so you're at Notre Dame, and you're coming to your end of your time, and everyone asks the, most annoying / famous question, what are you going to do next year? Yeah. And it's so much pressure. I wish I hadn't put so much pressure on myself during it and other people, but when did you start thinking, ooh, maybe I'll apply to this House of Brigid thing? Or, how did you hear about House of Brigid, first of all?
Yeah, so a year of service type thing was always on my radar, because I knew that law school was the ultimate goal, but every professor or lawyer I talked to was very insistent, do something else first.
Yeah,
don't
I told you, my dad, he went to law school, and he's my one regret is I just went straight into law school, and I don't know if I should have done that.
Yeah, and, I think I would have been fine if I had, but enough voices were telling me, look elsewhere, and I figured a year of service was a good type of elsewhere. So in the fall of my senior year, Notre Dame hosted a forget what it was called. I think it was called like a graduate, like, I wrote it down, a post-grad service fair. With a bunch of different organizations that I went to, because I was actively applying to law school, but was still trying to think of some way to spend my time. And at that fair, I saw one of the ARs in my dorm, so like the graduate students who live in the dorm and kind of help the RAs, wearing like the Ireland ND sweatshirt.
Yeah. Wait, was that Maddie?
It was Maddie.
Oh,
yeah.
That's Maddie Lopton for all of you who.
Yeah.
I did House Brigid with Maddie actually, and she was at University Church for 2 years.
So I recognized Maddie from the dorm, and then I
Yeah.
recognized the Ireland sweatshirt because I had done an internship here in 2022. So I stopped to say hello, and then that was how I heard of House of Brigid.
There you go.
Yeah.
And then you applied?
Then I applied.
When I applied to House Brigid, I remember seeing the application and being like, I'm not qualified to do this.
I definitely thought that.
Now I look back on that and I'm like, I did House Brigid for 2 years. They can't get rid of me. I don't do House Brigid anymore. But like, it's just funny to like be so intimidated by it.
Yeah.
But then like,
well, because I hadn't, like, I know how to read music, and I had been in choirs or band in middle school and high school, but I hadn't done anything substantial with music since then.
Yeah.
So I was looking at it, I was like, I'm not qualified at all. And then my parents, their advice was, like, let them decide. Like,
it's
just
so true.
apply. They'll tell you no if they want
so
to. And
it's so true.
yeah.
Were you like, how did you feel after the interview then? Like, did you have to do music stuff in the interview?
We just had to sing, and we didn't have to sing by ourselves. So
Oh,
I felt very comfortable with it.
I had to sing by myself. That's fine. I remember I put that I knew how to play piano, which I do, to be fair. I didn't lie. And then whoever was interviewing was like, oh, here's a piece of music. Can you just like sight read this and play it?
Oh my gosh.
And I can do that now because I've come like, I just am better at piano now than I was 6 years ago. Oh my gosh, 6 years ago. But I remember being like, oh, I can't do that. Like, I had to say in the interview, like, I can't do that. Like, I can play chords in my left hand and the melody in my right, but I can't sight read, like, that accompaniment. And Father Dennis, the priest who was there, was like, oh no, that's actually more useful. Like, more people in Ireland know how to do that. Yeah, that's better than doing. And I was like, how did I pass this question by not knowing? Anyway, that's my own little anecdote side thing. So yeah. You got into House Brigid. You decided to do it. Super easy decision.
For me, it actually was.
Was it?
Because I got in kind of atypically, where I was initially not offered a role. Between eventually being offered a role and that, I got into Duke. So I had committed to Duke, and then it was, I think, Palm Sunday at my dorm's mass, and I felt like not quite ready to leave the environment of like faith at Notre Dame. And was kind of scared of like what it would look like, what my own faith would look like once I left, because like, Notre Dame's a very special place for that. So I was going through all that and like asking God for guidance, and then the next day I got an email from Ann Horker, who runs House of Brigid at Notre Dame, saying that there was a position for me if I wanted it. So for me, I was like, all right, I'm in. Yeah. But I knew that Duke was too good of an opportunity, so I was like, I'll ask Duke to defer my enrollment for a year. If they say yes, then that's like the final sign that I go. And they said yes within like 24 hours. Like, it was a very quick turnaround. Yeah.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Yeah.
But it's such a like, when you're, how old are you? Like 21, 22, you're like, what?
Yeah.
What in the world? You think the world's going to end with whatever decision you make, and that's just not true either way. So you've been here for the whole year now. Yes. Fast forward, it's a year and some change since you made that decision. Has it been what you expected it to be, or like, how has it been working at a church and doing ministry? It's
been really great. I really didn't know what to expect. Like, as certain as I was also like totally jumping in blind, which looking back was very unlike me, and very like, I guess God works how he works, because I was so confident but also had so little information, and like everyone I asked, they were like, oh, it's kind of hard to explain exactly what we do day to day. I remember being frustrated by that, but now I find myself doing the same thing. Yeah, it's been great. I feel like I know the church better. Like,
ministry's hard to explain. Like, because, like, what does a priest do every day? Like, what is the priest's job? It's so many things. Like, I can't explain it in one sentence.
Yeah.
Or, like, what does our secretary do? She does so many things in one day. There's no, like, typical day. Okay, maybe a typical day is her answering emails, but, yeah, it's funny. And so how has working in ministry impacted, like, your personal faith and your personal faith journey?
Yeah. I've noticed that I'm a lot more comfortable praying publicly than I was before. Like, whenever I was in some, like, a youth group type deal and they asked somebody to pray, I was immediately full of dread because I was like, don't make me do it. I don't know what the words are. And that wasn't true for, like, personal prayer life, but kind of outwardly I struggled a lot. And part of what House of Brigid does is we select the readings for Taizé every week, and part of that is writing a prayer. So I pretty quickly had to become more comfortable and kind of thinking of, okay, like, connecting what I wanted to convey, like, how to make it sound prayerful for groups that a group could pray together. And that, I think it's made me stronger in my prayer life.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah.
I'm gonna out you now to everyone.
Okay.
I met for the last year. Every 2 weeks we did, like, a little check-in. It was more like, it was supposed to be a work check-in, but it's hard because I want to talk about non-work things. It's more fun. Yeah. And something you asked me towards the beginning of the year, which I thought gave good insight into how your brain works and what you were thinking of. You don't know what I'm gonna say, so I love this.
Remember what I said.
You were asking me, because so much of pastoral ministry is, like, just not cold calling, like, just talking to people, walking up to them and talking to them. And I remember when I was in net ministries, we'd have to go up and talk to middle schoolers. And I was 18 years old, but, like, talking to a 12-year-old, I was like, oh my gosh, they're gonna think I'm not cool. And, like, what do we talk about? Like, anyway. But you were asking, like, for advice on how to talk to people, like, after Mass or after Taizé or whatever, like, how do you do this so that you don't feel so weird? And I've been in that situation where I'm like, oh my God, I feel so awkward. Like, so I thought, I just admire that so much that you were like, do you have any advice on, like, chit-chatting, basically? Which I'm like, you just gotta, like, become an actress and you go out there. And then after a while, you aren't an actress anymore, and it's just you, and you get to know people and their names, and, like, I thought that's a really sweet memory I have of you, where I think I've seen you grow in being comfortable with talking to people and being comfortable in yourself, and So something you've worked on, many things. You were kind of my right-hand woman for the wedding photos project, which we love to talk about on this podcast because it's our favorite event. But something else you worked on, which I have only observed from afar because it was like a project Father Gary gave you, was what I call, like, the autograph book. Signature book? What are we calling it?
Well, I think of it as the autograph book.
Yeah. And what I think of when I hear the autograph book is, you know when you go to Disney and people have books and you have the characters sign their names? To me, you were looking through one of those. But correct me what it was. What did Father Gary bring to you? And just explain.
Someone had given Father Gary this book of signatures or autographs from the 1870s. I don't know where she found it or, like, how. I don't know why she bought it, but she bought it. It had John Henry Newman's signature in it, so she gave it to Father Gary to be like, Newman University Church. And he gave it to me, and his instructions were essentially just, like, find out what's in here. So I spent a couple months doing that, and I basically learned that starting in the Victorian era, like, those kind of autograph books that now we associate with Disney were just really popular. So people tended to have them, and, like, if a guest would come to your house, you would have them sign. If you met someone interesting, you'd have them sign. And this book ended up, it was owned by the sister of a prominent English bishop. So that's why John Henry Newman's signature is in it, and a whole bunch of other, like, famous Catholics of the time period who we wouldn't have heard of now are signed in the book.
So when you open the book, like, did you recognize any names? You obviously recognized John Henry Newman. That's why we got the book. But did you recognize any of the others? Or was it all just, like, a Google search? Like, how did you, like, what did you do first? Did you translate it? Not translate it, but, like, scribe it all down or what?
First, I transcribed it all,
Okay.
Which proved pretty difficult with some handwriting.
Yeah.
So there are a few that I just was like, no matter how hard I work, I'm not going to get this.
Yeah.
But I started transcribing it all, and then I just kind of Googled all the names, because John Henry Newman was the only one I recognized. And some had hints, like some people signed with their name and their title, so that was easier to find.
Nice.
But it was just a lot of Googling, a lot of looking at the Hesburgh Library has online databases that I could use, so I used a lot of those to just see what was out there.
And so you said, like, sometimes people would, like, sign it when they would go over for dinner or something.
Mm-hmm.
So did this woman have all these people over for dinner, do you think? Or what do you think, what's your hypothesis on where this woman went with this book?
So there's one, she ends up in Paris at some point, because there are a few signatures that she's gone. I assume she did it and not someone else went back and added to a signature the word Paris. So that's my assumption is she went there. Other than that, a lot of them lived nearby. So she lived in Kenilworth, which is near Birmingham, England.
Okay.
And a lot of the people lived in that general area.
Okay.
They also, I found, started to have similar stories where, so John Henry Newman famously, like, converts to Catholicism.
Yeah.
A lot of the people that signed also, a lot of them were inspired by him, but a lot of them had this similar trajectory where they were Anglicans and were part of this movement in the, like, mid-19th century to convert to Catholicism.
Yeah.
So I imagine that community was connected in some way.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, because another one of those who was Anglican and became Catholic was John Hungerford Paulin, who helped design the church, which Aoife was talking about. Okay. So what was, like, so there were signatures, was it just signatures and titles in there, or were there, like, mottos in there, or sayings, or, like, what else was in there?
Yeah, so I learned from so Francis Carroll Amherst was the bishop of Northampton at the time.
Yeah.
He was the brother of the woman who owned this book, and he wrote a very long paragraph that inadvertently gave me the purpose of the book, where basically he had written, "You've asked me to write my favorite motto," and that's kind of how and then that's the middle of the book, so that was an exciting discovery. Because the book it's basically some sort of phrase and then the person's name and the date. So I learned after I read his that the phrase is the favorite motto.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember any of the phrases? Or...
a lot of them were quotes from, there were Shakespeare quotes, there was a Merchant of Venice quote that stands out, Aristotle quotes, a lot of prayers. John Henry Newman wrote "Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit," written in Latin.
Yeah.
There were also a few. There was one that said, a couple said "Never say die." One that I thought was interesting was "Honesty is the best policy," just because that interested me, because that sounds so modern to my ears.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
But I guess
that could be on my Pinterest board.
Exactly. So a whole range of, like, quotes, "Honesty is the best policy," like all sorts of different languages. Yeah. It was interesting.
And did Father Gary just hand you the book? I remember you having, like, gloves, or, like, we have a bunch of Newman Center t-shirts that she, like, made a little pillow for the book in, which was funny to walk down and be like, "What are you doing, Emily?" She has all these shirts around her.
Yeah. He did just hand it. It was in this little envelope. Okay. Really, like, no guidance.
Yeah, sounds like Father Gary.
It's kind of fun. But yeah, I didn't do gloves.
Okay.
But I did use, so if you were to go to an archive, when they give you a book, they give you these giant foam, like, blocks that basically, I'm using my hands as if you can see me. They're these blocks that, like, keep the book open kind of in a V shape. Yeah. So that the spine isn't bent. So I was trying to replicate that, so I piled up these t-shirts to make my own little shape.
And it worked.
It did work. The spine did not break.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Is there anything else you want to say about the book?
Oh gosh.
Oh, like something cool that you did was you compiled like an online flip book. So you took pictures of everything, and so you can look at the book even if you're not there in person looking at it, which is also funny because you made a flip book and Father Gary was so impressed by it. He was like, Katherine, look at this flip book Emily made. I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. We made one of those last year.
I used the design from last year.
It was just so funny
to see how it was made.
I was like, you don't know what we do here. I'm sorry, I'm slagging on Father Gary too much. But so there's an online flip book, which we will put on our website so people can see. And then also the book is in person.
Yes.
Where is it?
The book is in the back of the church. We have a signature from John Henry Newman that, I don't know how long it's been here. I don't know if you know. But
I don't know.
We have the book directly under that.
Oh, yeah. We have like a letter.
Signature on the wall. Yeah.
Yeah, a letter from John Henry Newman. And then, is this piece of hair over there as well?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, piece of hair somewhere else. Never mind. You didn't hear me say that. But we have a letter from John Henry Newman, something else, just all in the back of the church, like random John Henry Newman artifacts we put in the back of the church. Yeah. But it's so official. It's on
really
a museum display book.
Yes. So it's opened to his page, which is part of why I made the flip book. Because in the back of the church, you can only see his signature and then the one or two that are also on that page.
Yeah.
But I thought it was really interesting to get little glimpses into the lives of all of these people.
Yeah.
So.
Did it inspire you? Do you want to start an autograph book? I kind of don't hate this idea.
It did make me more cognizant of how bad my handwriting is.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because I was trying to read these things, and this, like I mentioned at the top, I studied history, and what I'm about to say is going to make it so obvious that I love history. But I was reading these people's signatures, and the ones that I couldn't read at all made me a little bit sad, because I was like, they took the time to try to make this memory, and then 150 years later, I'm here, and their name is lost, their words are lost, because their handwriting is so bad.
Yeah.
So I have tried to be a little bit nicer in how I write.
That's such a good thing to take away. Because I'm a very big proponent of good handwriting, so... Yes. Wow.
Yeah.
I like this idea, though, of, collecting, quotes or sayings or mottos that people have. That's kind of fun.
It is fun, and it's fun to think that, because none of these people, other than John Henry Newman, none of their legacies outlasted them in any substantial way.
Yeah.
But it's still interesting that, just because we have the words that they left, people now are interested in seeing, what was said.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. Well, before we wrap up this episode, I want to know, your time of House Brigid is coming to an end in less than 2 weeks from when we're recording this, so who knows when this is getting released. But what is one thing that you're going to take away from this experience?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question.
Thank you. I am the host.
I think, like you mentioned, I've become a lot more comfortable with just kind of chatting with whoever comes along. And I think part of why that became easier for me was seeing the way that everybody wants to just talk about what they care about. So I think that the biggest takeaway for me in terms of my life going forward is going to be just being more approachable with anybody I meet and letting them talk about whatever they want. Which
that's sweet. And I mean, you can talk about what you want to as well.
True. But I mean, I've always been a quiet, don't really engage with strangers.
Sure.
And I like that I'm now a lot more comfortable chatting with whoever comes into the door.
Yeah.
Especially because we, a lot of the people who come through our church are people that I would say most of the people who come to our church are people who in my personal life, I would never naturally come across.
Sure.
But I've come to form, personal bonds with a lot of them. So it's a nice reminder that
That's very
To
sweet.
reach out to whoever is around.
Oh, that's very sweet.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Yes, thank you.
And thanks everyone for listening. We'll chat to you next time. This podcast was produced and recorded by the Notre Dame Newman Center for Faith and Reason. Founded in 2017 by the University of Notre Dame at the invitation of the Archbishop of Dublin, the center fosters the lively interplay of faith and intellectual inquiry to inform and deepen our understanding of God and the modern world. Inspired by Saint John Henry Newman, the center seeks to make God known, loved, and served through concerts, lectures, masses, and prayers designed especially for the young urban adult who live and work in Dublin city centre. Our efforts of evangelization are aided by a robust social media presence and by coordination with other Catholic and ecumenical groups. The center is situated at Newman University Church, Our Lady Seat of Wisdom, a small but thriving parish community in St. Stephen's Green. Visit newman.nd.edu or follow any of our socials at ND Newman Center for more information.